Should we go ahead and get started? Okay. I saw the agenda was out there. There's just one item on here as an update on TCG. I thought also it might be helpful, maybe just start, if anybody wants to talk about the board work session last night. As we mentioned, I had to leave after about 30 minutes. I wasn't around for the conversation thereafter, but if everybody wouldn't mind, I wouldn't mind putting that first on the agenda. Otherwise, with that one amendment, is there anything else anybody wants to talk about? Needs to be added to the agenda.
I just have a quick question. I just want to make sure that people got the explanation that I had sent out regarding the actuarial fees, and if there was any questions on that.
Not hearing any, so I think we're good there. I guess just to approve the agenda, can I get a motion to approve the agenda with TCG and maybe an update on the board work session last night?
So move approval of the agenda as modified.
Second. I see Melissa nodding, so we'll count her as a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Who wants to talk about the work session last night? Kathy, are you in a position to kind of share your thoughts, and then maybe some active and retired members who listened in can share their thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just give a brief summary, and then Jessica, Blake, and Barb were all present, and so if they want to add in, I think that would be great. So we had a work session last night with the board. The scope of the meeting was to just give the board more of a general understanding of the Des Moines Teachers Plan and kind of the challenges that surround us right now within the plan, to talk a little bit about the scope of the work from TCG, and then where we go from here. You know, what are our next steps? So Barb and Jessica and Brad all spoke and explained their viewpoint on the plan and concerns. Jessica from the active stance, Barb from the retiree stance, and Brad from an overall plan perspective. They all did a marvelous job of representing you. I think they were very well spoken and very relatable for the board to hear and understand their concerns. Then I went through a PowerPoint very similar to the one that we had gone over, I don't remember, like 6 months ago, not even, of just a little background on the plan, the history of the plan, how the contributions are different. Talked a little bit about that, talked about the plan structure itself, talked about the investment policy and strategies there, and then moved into an explanation of the work that we had done previously with IPERS, and how that overall price tag on that work had made it so that was something that we could not pursue going forward. And then we talked about the TCG work and just the scope of that, and I won't go into detail with it. We talk about the meeting, and then we can talk a little bit more about the scope of that work. So that was kind of in a nutshell what happened at the meeting. It's not a decision-making meeting by any stretch of the imagination. It's more just for the board to gain information. They did go around and ask questions, and I thought some very good questions that they had asked, and seemed to really be interested, and thought that maybe they'd have more questions as we produce further information from TCG. So with that, Blake, Barb, do you want to add anything?
I think I'll add some of what I thought were takeaways from the board members. Were a prioritization of streamlining communication for our active and our retired members, knowing that process is much easier for actives than it is for retired. And really even a second dimension, which sort of even came in at the end of the meeting, Ms. Knox highlighted this sort of a second time, which was how do we not only communicate, but how do we begin to seek more almost like a vote or a consensus of what actions are desired, even beyond the 9 of us who are elected as their representatives. I'm not sure that I have a lot of good answers around that, but I think that that was the desire, is that a lot of the communication that they're receiving from members is understandably, I think from our perspective, it's not uniform. I spent a little bit of time after the board meeting kind of talking about how challenging that is, and we alluded to that in some of our comments about, you know, what a 32-year-old member in the plan sort of wants and needs and what makes sense is different than a 60-year-old in the plan who's still active, and that's different than what an 85-year-old who is retired may need in the plan. And the second one was for our committee to be bringing forward additional ideas, strategies, and planning. And I think that hopefully tonight, after we can maybe dive a little more into TCG in phase 1, I'm hopeful that we can identify where is our spot, where is our place, so that we don't step on the work of TCG. Also, we don't want to be redundant to the work of TCG, but that we're providing some of those additional options that I think the board is looking for. And I know Ms. Caldwell Johnson talked about that, and there were a couple other board members who were kind of addressing that similar idea and concept. Barb, do you want to jump in?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Kathy, you had mentioned an avenue to do the communication for everybody. Can you review that?
I'm wondering if there's something we could do through the board docs that we use right now to post the meetings, and that minutes can be posted to. And if maybe there's an opportunity, and I need to talk to Rosa a little bit more on this to see if there's an avenue to do like a post a question and answer, or just current happenings or something. There has to be a way to do more communication using that. And I think that would at least be a tool that people could access. My biggest struggle with that is to communicate to the actives is fairly easy because I can send an email. To communicate to the retirees and have them have to go through board docs could be problematic. I mean, there's plenty of retirees who are computer savvy, but there's several that are not. And if we rely on having to do like a newsletter type thing and mail it to them, by the time they get it, it's no longer timely communication. And that's where I really struggle. So I am open to suggestions on ways that you think we can communicate with the retirees on a more time sensitive nature. Because if I have to now do a newsletter about this meeting that we just had and summarize that and then send it, by the time they get it, it's 2 weeks old.
So Kathy, do you have, do you know offhand about how many email addresses you have for retirees and how many are just mail?
I would say we have less than 100 emails.
Wow, okay. You know, could some communication be sent out? I mean, I can't believe that more than 100 people don't have emails. I mean, I think I have about 175, so.
We've asked for them before when we sent out ballots and things
Yeah.
like that. Any communication that we've sent that they've had to send back, we've asked that they provide it, and we just don't get them from people.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my preferred method of communication. But then there still has to be an alternate for those people who don't have email.
Hey, Kathy, can I ask a question?
I suppose.
I literally just transferred over from a Zoom meeting where I am the ISCA retired staff liaison now that works with all of our ISCA retired members. And an idea that I'm going to steal regarding this very same thing about updating information is they do a postcard campaign once a year and donate a gift card or $100 bill and put it in a drawing for those that update it. And I'm wondering if we want to do some sort of mailing. If the district wants to pay for the mailing, maybe DMEA could come up with the door prize or whatever it is, just to see if there's a way to try to incent all of that information.
That's an idea.
I guess the other thing, Kathy, is there some way that we could, you know, retirees could sit down and do something? I mean, get a mailing out. I mean, would that be appropriate for us to send something out if we have all those addresses? And I don't know, just some way to help facilitate that, so we have some, just more information from those people.
Yeah, and you know, if
possible.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask if it would be possible to, if we are going to get the portal up and running, have announcements be put on the portal and give everybody access to the portal.
Retirees don't have access to the portal because it's for active balances. Retirees have access through, well, now the principal, no longer the Wells Fargo, but the principal portal. And that's not a method for us to provide communication. That's a principal tool.
Gotcha. Sorry.
Nope. Good thought, though.
I was going to suggest, similar to what Doug suggested, is that if we do a snail mail approach with a survey link attached, that people could update the year they retired, their name, and also their email addresses. It may be helpful. So I was going to suggest that same kind of thing. I think we do have a way of getting in touch with people. It's just not rapid. So, and part of it is we just need a database to get their email addresses. Melissa, do you have an additional comment?
Yes, I noticed in the chat. So Jennifer Proctor, who's like me, she's one of those inactive actives. Do we just, I think what we get, I get obviously more things as being part of the committee, but do we just get the same mailings that like retirees get, or do you have email addresses for some of them? Or should we be sure to include them on any sort of information drive that we do?
That you would need to be included in that same information drive because we don't have a lot of that information. Yeah, it is a challenge. The communication piece is a challenge there. And unfortunately, you know, I think if we could get a lot of the email addresses, that would be ideal to get that communication out, but we're still going to have a backup for those that we don't have. Just knowing that hopefully the push is that the majority of our people would submit an email address, and it would be more the exception basis that we would have to send out or post something to this Board Docs website. But I still think even posting it to Board Docs is not enough. If you've got, you know, a 95-year-old retiree, they're not probably surfing the web and looking through Board Docs. They might be, you never know. I think, you know, I always say my parents are probably more tech savvy than I am. So who knows, but.
Do we need to make some sort of a formal motion to hold ourselves accountable to actually following through on this? Because this is not the first time we've had this conversation. Like, do we like the idea of a postcard or a simple mailer out that has a link at minimum where people can dump in their information as a starting point? And then Doug already said that he's going to volunteer up did he say $1,000? I thought Doug said he was going to pay for $1,000 gift card. I might have misheard that, but
A brand new car.
Okay, see, it's now up to a brand new car. So for the retirees and the inactive actives, but do we need a formal motion so that we hold ourselves accountable to that with a timeline?
I think if it's just noted in the minutes and noted on record, this meeting's recorded. So we note that we will get a postcard together with a survey to update addresses. I need to look and see if there's a mechanism within our principal record keeping system for pensions to store their email, because that becomes problematic also if we don't have a place to store it. if I have to store it somewhere separate from where I'm storing their address information, I just want to make sure. And I don't know that there is, but I might be able to use some user field or something for that. I just want to make sure that I've got a place to capture it if we ask for it.
Is there at least one person on the committee who will work with Kathy to kind of follow up and support in any way that we can?
Yeah, Kathy, let me know what you need. I can help with that.
Thank you.
I could as well.
Okay. What I'll do is I'm thinking maybe after we have this meeting and we talk a little bit more about TCG is maybe a simple newsletter just as update retirees and inactives, and then an email for the actives stating the same of what's going on with TCG, and then within that same communication say something about providing email addresses. And Doug is really good. I see he mentioned in the comments, love it, and he will help as needed. He's really good at stuffing envelopes and putting labels on. That's one of his skill sets.
And giving away a car.
Yeah.
Matchbox.
Way to crush everybody, Brad.
That's what actuaries do.
And Doug, I appreciated your bringing up yesterday the perspective on the waterworks pension thing and how it moved. I had no idea about that, and I'm sure that was probably information to a lot of us in this room as well.
Well, and if there's anything more, Shashank, my father-in-law was one of those that had to wait the 7 years to retire from the waterworks and was actually on their bargaining team. So I can get you all the information you want, and if we ever go down that road, what the perspective of a waterworks pension and an IPERS pension is and how it works. But yes, anytime, sir.
All right. Anything else from the meeting last night? Observations?
Jessica, you joined a little bit later. Did you have any observations from last night that you wanted to share?
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I was tardy. Staff meeting. Whoa. Okay. So I thought I was very encouraged that with the types of questions that the board members were asking, that they had some really good insights in the types of questions they were asking and suggestions that they were making. I felt like they had a lot of empathy for our situation. I also got the idea that they had understood that there isn't going to be a simple solution to this problem, that it is going to have to be a complex solution. And I hope that we can come up with a strategy to exit this plan in a way that satisfies our retirees, that satisfies our older actives, and satisfies our younger actives. And is also fiscally responsible. I also shared that if our TCG comes through with suggestions that we have already thought of, explored, and even proposed, and nothing more, I will be a little disappointed in our long wait for this. But I gotta admit that after listening to them and some of the things that they're doing, I have a little bit more optimism for fresh ideas that will help us out. So I guess that was my feeling after the meeting. I was very encouraged. I thought that a lot of the things that were presented were clear and helpful. So I don't know if that reflects on what other people said.
I would say so. Yeah, I thought so.
Very good. Anything else? So, Barb, go ahead.
There was just I just wanted some comments on this or your thoughts, maybe Kathy. Just one of the board members had a question about, phase 1 and phase 2 coming at different times and making decisions on phase 1 and phase 2 at different times. Is that you know, is that going to be a problem? I mean, is that going to be difficult for the board to do? Because one kind of depends on the other. I guess your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't know, Barb, that I have an answer really on that
Okay.
until I see kind of some of the work from TCG to see what phase 1 is and to have further conversations with them to see how far out they think phase 2 is. Now, I think phase 2 will depend upon our actions in phase 1. So if we're keeping the plan and doing a supplemental retirement plan alongside of it, I think that changes phase 2. If we are dissolving the plan and terminating the plan and moving everybody out in phase 1, then I think that changes phase 2. So I really think it's going to be dependent upon what action is determined in phase 1.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Hey, this is Terry, and I apologize. I'm leaving another meeting, heading back to my office, but I'm not driving. I'm actually in my office parking lot right now. But I did want to just speak to your comment, Barb, because based on what I believe to be the case with the consultant's work, I think that our hope was to have been at a critical juncture with their findings and with their recommendations, that they could be factored into the budget process this year without forcing a fit and without also putting pressure on when we want to make sure we get this right. I'm not for sure that that's necessarily going to be doable. So I think that as much as we would like for this work to be, you know, wrapped up with a nice bow so that we could incorporate it into our budget deliberations this year, I just don't believe that to be the case. I feel like we've got a shot to get this done and to get it right. And to Kathy's point, when she and I were communicating about this yesterday, if that means that we take extra time and we are not only doing all of our due diligence, but getting to a point where we feel like we can get to a resolution, and that's, you know, in the summer or the fall, then that's what it's going to take. And we'll just have to, you know, take our lumps with regard to timing and figure out how we factor that into budget deliberations in a subsequent year. But I think we all agree that at this point, we want to err on the side of providing ample time to get it done and to get it done right, as opposed to trying to accelerate a timeline, which may or may not get us to a product or something that we believe will make a difference. So that's the first thing that I would offer, just as sort of a takeaway that I had from last night. I also want to mention, someone said something, I don't know, I think it was you, Jessica, about wanting to make sure that the consultant isn't going over stuff that we've already considered and decided we don't want to do, but rather is focused on new opportunities, new initiatives. So I think we have to rely on Kathy to be sort of our mouthpiece and our communicator around sort of the background and the information that has already been shared, the options that have been pursued, so that we don't feel like we're spinning our wheels on old stuff and really can be much more focused on what new or what other opportunities, you know, lie out there. And then the final thing that I would just offer is, and I think I was the one that raised this last night, but, you know, I feel like there are some root cause challenges or opportunities that we need to evaluate when it comes to the way the plan is designed. And if there are ways that we can begin to think about a plan redesign that allows us to, in a way, be more responsive to some of the challenges that the current plan presents, but also honors where I think we want to go with this, I think that that's also a part of the equation that needs to be pursued. So those are sort of my general takeaways from last night, and also a response to a couple of the comments that I heard today. But the board chair, Dewana Bradley, has asked me to sort of take the lead on this with the board, since I am the board's representative to the committee. So, you know, trust that I will do whatever I can to ensure that we not only have a two-way communication and that there's clarity of communication, but that we're also ensuring that we're on the same page as we move forward. We may not get what everybody wants, and it may not look ultimately like what we would hope that it did, but I think as long as we all move forward with good intentions of trying to honor our obligations, then I think that's the best that we can hope for as we continue to push sort of this. I don't know if it's, are we pushing the boulder up the hill? I don't know where the boulder is at this point, but as we continue to move this thing forward, I've been on this board for 15 years, y'all, and we've been talking about DMTRS for all 15 of those. So this is my last term, and I'm hoping that in my last term we can get this fixed.
The rest of us are too.
Blake, go ahead.
Ms. Caldwell-Johnson, can I ask a little follow-up on that second question? You spoke about, you know, the really looking at the plan itself. Do you see that we should be doing that work now, or do we wait for TCG to bring out the details of phase one? And the reason I asked that, and we haven't really jumped into the TCG, I'm going to jump ahead. One of the things that I'm unclear on is, well, maybe I'm clear on it when I read it, but I'm confused, is when I read phase one of the TCG proposal, it reads to me pretty clearly that, and I'm just going to read it out loud for those of you who don't know, it just says phase one, TCG would first work with the plan data and the actuary to develop scenarios to offer the best possible economic solutions to the active employees, such that when their future IPERS benefit is combined with their frozen DMTRS benefit, they would find the offer to be acceptable. The goal of phase one would be to find a way to transition current active employees to IPERS for future benefits. Then their frozen benefits would become part of the same quote unquote problem as the retirees, which then gets into phase two. And so when I read that, it feels to me as if we've closed off changes to the existing plan and that it's sort of an all-in to move people to IPERS.
So I'll give you my layperson's interpretation, and that's why I last night raised this with Kathy, suggesting that if there's an opportunity to sort of on parallel tracks look at plan changes that align back to where ultimately they may be suggesting we go, that somehow address many of the things that came up last night that were raised by both the retirees and the actives. It just seems to me that if we have the ability to sort of do those things on parallel tracks, we're one step ahead. So as opposed to sort of waiting for this shoe to drop and then, you know, going to this one, it just felt to me as if we could do those simultaneously. That might kill two birds with one stone. What I don't know, though, and I would defer to Kathy on this, what I don't know is whether or not, number one, that's feasible or doable. And if so, how we ensure that that's happening. So again, I'm not an expert. I'm learning as I go, but you know, logically, that just felt like a sweet spot for me that if we could capture it, it just made sense. So I'll defer to Kathy at this point because she is the expert.
No, thank you for that clarification though, Terry. That helps me a lot. Thank you.
One of the things I kind of want to point out with the whole TCG proposal that was shared with phase one and phase two is that that was a proposal of scope of work, and we've had some conversations since then to more narrowly define their scope. So when it says to move everybody to IPERS, that was one of the first thoughts that came into their mind, but we've also asked them in phase one, look at all options out there that can target more income replacement. That's what we're looking at more so than saying we want something that moves everybody to IPERS. We're saying we want something that provides the Des Moines teachers retirement participants with a benefit that has a higher income replacement level than it currently has today, and give us some different scenarios for getting there. So I think that original proposal was just given off of their 10-minute conversation with Tom regarding, kind of some of the interests. But as we've talked, that phase one has evolved a little bit more than is defined in that proposal.
I was excited to kind of see, while sometimes I'm a little bit reluctant about consultants and things like that, I think in this case, it's really needed because we've been spinning our wheels for so long. And because, as they mentioned, that we are truly unique. And this is actually their scope. They can compare across the country. They can really do some of the legwork that we're not able to do because we're a volunteer committee. And then plus our staff members have, other giant parts of their work to do. So I was glad to see a pretty succinct summary of what they're looking at. And I'm hoping that we can get some good proposals on that we can move forward with instead of continuing to discuss it amongst ourselves.
Yeah, and to reiterate, after speaking with TCG, I am more optimistic that they'll actually come up with something that we haven't thought of. But I am also been through this, I've been around this wheel a few times, right? And so I'm a little wary of going around the wheel one more time. And so that was all, just an emotional feeling that I'm having of going around this wheel. I think, Terry, when you said, this is your 15th year of working on this problem, I'm right there with you. I've just been on this wheel a few times and I'm tired of going through the mud, to be honest. So I'm optimistic after talking with TCG that they're going to have some ideas that may be helpful in getting us out of this rut we're in. I hope. Please, God.
Should we pivot to talking TCG then? Next agenda item.
Yeah. So as I alluded to, I think phase one has kind of evolved a little bit from the original proposal. In my conversations that I had yesterday with Mr. Cochran from TCG, they have all of our data from the actuary as well as from Des Moines schools that they have requested, and are just starting on building out a model to do some projections. In their model, they're looking at the present value of people's current Des Moines teachers' benefits, projecting out what your benefit would be at anticipated retirement, looking at what income replacement levels those have, and then looking at some targets for income replacement levels. That should get us with a basic understanding and dollar value of what it would cost to get to X replacement value. And they're doing this all in a model that we can change assumptions. So if we're saying we want everybody to have a 60% income replacement model, and then we say, oh, we can't afford 60, what does it look like at this? They're going to put that flexibility in it so it doesn't require them to redo everything every time we ask for a different scenario. So that at least is a bonus in my eyes. Once they do that, that should give us some dollar amounts. And then they were going to be looking at different ways that we could fund that, different funding mechanisms, such as, the 401A supplemental retirement plans, changing our own plan, moving people, those different options, as well as looking at where the money can come from. We've said, we believe it needs to come from general fund. They want to look and make sure that that's our only option. And I applaud that. If they can find somewhere else for us to find that money, I don't think there's like I keep saying to Shashank, I'm looking for that envelope underneath my chair that's taped there with millions in it so I can fix the problem, but I haven't found it yet. So maybe if they can uncover something. So those were some of the things they were looking at. One of the advantages of looking at different funding methodologies, if we do something more like a supplemental plan versus the old scenario we talked about of moving everybody to IPERS with credit, that's off the table now, but that scenario required a lump sum of money. The other scenarios would allow us to do it more in a dollar cost average over years in order to get to those targets. So I think there's some advantages to those types of things. That's all phase one. They have told me that they will have a first draft of the model by the end of February. I asked, then can we do discussions in March to tweak that model, and just some discussions, and hopefully get that model how we want it, and hopefully have a final product by April. And they were a little hesitant to commit to that time frame because they don't know how much tweaking will need to be done. And that's when he said, I'd rather do it right than do it quickly. However, for those of you who have been waiting, time is money. And so trust me, and please take my word that I won't just sit back and let them take their own sweet time. We're going to keep pushing on this. We're going to keep moving. Just because we say time, I'm not saying time is years. I'm saying time is maybe another month longer. I'm not willing to let this go on forever. So that's kind of where we are on phase one. I asked them if we could do weekly meetings, and he said he didn't really think there was a need for a weekly meeting. And I said, but I do, so I'd like to do weekly meetings. So I'll continue to badger him on a weekly basis. And I don't know that I'll have a lot to update, because right now they're working on the model, and it might just be, we had a conversation, they continue to work on the model. They don't seem to have any questions or need further information. But I don't want people to feel like we're keeping this all a big secret either.
Kathy, can I ask, as your understanding of, as they look at that that model and they're projecting forward, are they projecting forward taking into account the current DMTRS investment portfolio?
Like, I honestly don't know until I see what their model even looks like. They have our current portfolio information. They have our annual report. They have our investment policy statement. They have everybody's current balances. So I'm not sure until I see it. And I can ask some of those questions in my next update meeting as well.
Kathy, can you talk about what you see? So let's just say that they've got their model, it's ready to be viewed. Do you see management kind of going through it first, this advisory board kind of going through it second, maybe going back to even management a third and a fourth view before it goes to the school board? Where do you see this committee in that process?
I would think the first blush will be, management looking through it to see if it's achieving what we want and what the assumptions are. As we get it dialed in finer, I would think that there would be some communication and opportunities for advisory committee to look through that as well. What we want to do, Blake, is to have people's buy-in and comfort level on it before it would go to the board. What I don't think would be productive is for us to present something to the board, and by us, I mean management present something to the board that the advisory committee has not even looked at and understood and blessed. That to me is a counterproductive strategy. I would rather get everybody at least hear concerns, whether we come to consensus or not. At least we have that opportunity to have those conversations prior to it going to the board level.
Hey, one other quick thing that I would offer in that regard, and this was one of the things that my board colleague Jenna Knotts brought up last night, but it really goes to sort of the two audiences that are being served by this plan, or maybe it's three. So it's the retirees, the actives, and then the employed actives. Ensuring that there is a level of consensus across those audiences so that we're not trying to serve the needs of three, but rather serve the needs of a unified body that is through some consensus process in support of what is being advanced to the board would be critically important. I think speaking through three different voices based on the recommendations is counterproductive to our ability to get to closure on this, which is clearly where the board wants to go. So I just really would implore us to really be thoughtful about, one band, one sound, speak with one voice when you come with any thoughts or feedback based on the consultant's recommendations, so that we're not confusing the issue and we don't feel like there are competing demands that somehow we have to parse that will really virtually be impossible for us to do. Because we have a dog in the fight because all of you are ours, but we don't necessarily have a dog in the fight when it comes to who we pick as a priority and whose issues sort of rise to the top versus others. So the better we can be at coming with, a single voice and consensus around the recommendations, the easier it's going to be for the board to take the actions that they need to, as opposed to having to pick and choose.
Barb, did you have a question?
Just going back to all the information that TCG has, we have that $20,000 actuary report, and I don't know that I know what was in that information, but is any of that information helpful to them? And then I guess my question about that, in that report, did we get any information about, the projection of the end of life of the plan? What does it look like when the last member has passed away? What's the financial liability? Is that a number we know, or a projection we know?
I think the first part of your question, the actuarial report, I know that Larry has shared all of his actuarial reports with TCG and had a conversation with them as well regarding his studies. I was not part of that conversation, so I don't know how much they went into the newer report that he just completed, but I do know that he shared it with them because I was part of that email. So I know that the actuarial study, that additional one that we did, has been shared. As far as I don't know off the top of my head, and I don't have the reports in front of me, if we know what the plan looks like when the last person closes the door behind them. And that's something that Brad, Mr. Actuary speak. Do you have anything to share on that piece?
That's interesting. It depends on, I guess, like the plan documents, and maybe this isn't defined at all. So I guess there are a couple different scenarios. The plan runs out of money before everybody passes away. You talk about closing the door, Kathy. I think this is like closing the coffin door. Like, we're talking about people passing away here. So either the money outlasts the people, or the people outlast the money. It's not going to happen on the same day. If the people outlast the money, then the district's on the hook, I would imagine, to fulfill guaranteed benefit payments. Excess earnings probably goes away, but you're on the hook for those benefit payments. The more interesting and curious scenario is where there's a bunch of money left in the plan and there's like one person left. Is this like a tontine where the last person alive gets all the money, or are they just subject or guaranteed their payments, right? I don't know. Those are the two scenarios. Either way, people are made whole. Payments probably look different because in the money outlasting the people scenario, there's probably more upside available because the excess returns would be greater than the benefits that you're accruing. The people outlasting the money is the taxpayers are on the hook. So
is there a way for an actuary to make a projection about that based on what they're paying out now, what they can project to pay out? Is there any?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't speak to like what modeling software they would have. I know like at my day job, we would do that kind of work all the time to understand like what the surplus would be over time. and run some different interest rate scenarios to understand, you know, if rates go up, then things look better. If rates stay low, things are probably more dire. Run different investment strategies. I know, like, we have that capability here. I'm not sure what the consultants have available to them or how much that would cost. That kind of modeling is not cheap.
And did we ask for that in that $20,000 report we did, or no? I can't remember specifically what we asked them to do.
Well, because when we go back to why we even asked for any of these reports, it really was to be able to look not necessarily to the end of the road in the plan, but we had hoped to have a 5 and a 10-year look, because I think that's where we've struggled with. You know, we've talked about the investment policy and, like, do we have any of those wiggle room pieces? You know, to the point of Ms. Caldwell Johnson's, you know, the board member asking, like, you know, how do we look at some of the levers? Do we need to actually break a lever and, you know, install a new one on this machine here? It's been hard for us because the only projections we have really looking forward are the ones that we've done on our own. I think for me, and I guess I can ask it again because I think I've asked for it 5 or 10 times, at some point along the way, we've got to have a mechanism to know where are things at 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I think if this body is going to have a look at the plan document in context of what would be the changes that we could make to improve the income replacement and get a whole heck of a lot closer to a 60% income replacement rate. But if we can't agree to some forward projections, I understand any one of you would be like, I don't really want to trust Blake's numbers. I don't think that the science teacher down the hallway who does this for fun on the weekends is probably the most reliable source for what this plan is going to be like in 5 or 10 years.
Well, just as an aside, I plan to live as long as possible, and I'm planning on being the last one out the door. So there.
Good job, Gordon. I was just
I mean, we
pulling
got to
up.
have a little levity around here. This thing is getting deadly serious. I'm feeling really.
Yeah. I just pulled up the report that we had received back from Gallagher to see. We talked about mortality rates and interest rate sensitivities in it, plan funding ratio and asset allocation. Let's see what else we talked. That's mainly what we had them look at during that time frame. And I think in one of our previous meetings, Brad started to go through kind of that report a little bit with us, and then I think we got derailed. And so maybe that for our next meeting or a next meeting, that would be something good to pull back up and have Brad walk through it, because I think he does a great job in explaining it in layman's terms for all of us. Putting you back on the spot, Brad.
Sure. Could you send me another copy of that?
You bet.
I think I printed it off and I lost my printed copy of it. I had some really good notes on there, but yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. And maybe that's something we put back on our agenda for the next meeting, and just kind of a walkthrough of that. Because I remember our conversations on it too, Brad, of that there was a lot of really good information in there. It's just not in a very user-friendly format.
So I want to ask, because I think we're sort of segueing to what's next. Do we do that sort of review where everyone feels as comfortable as we can with sort of where we are, the dynamics of the pieces that we know? Does this committee then is our second action step to begin to look at the actual plan document and the operation of the plan to say, while TCG is doing their work, do we then begin to, because some of these conversations, you know, we've had in part and parcel, you know, we've had conversations about the contribution rate. In fact, we have a standing 9-0 motion to increase the employer contribution rate, and we had, you know, the rationale behind it. We've had discussions, although we haven't gotten very in-depth about, do we have the ability, and does it make sense to, you know, take the investment side and split into two? Do you have where the retirees' dollars are invested and the active dollars actually invested in a different way to best meet the needs of that particular group? I mean, do we spend the time to start looking at the pieces that we already have of this puzzle and what it might look like to do a rework of the DMTRS plan document to make it maximize where retirees are and what they need, maximize where our inactive actives are and what they need, and maximize the employed actives and what they need? That would be that's going to be a huge lift for us, and also one where, not that we have to be, you know, we always have to be cognizant of the legal ramifications, but we also have to have some confidence, because it seems to me on my 2 years that every time we go down a road, someone just has to say legal, and then everything just stops dead in its tracks, even though sometimes there wasn't actually a legal. And that for me is where I have a hesitation about jumping forward, because we've done this, you know, not all together at once. I should have ended that with a question mark. So sort of seeing where others on the committee feel like, is that the work we want to do? Because it is going to be a large amount of work. But I do appreciate and like the idea that, again, we can't get down this road, because if TCG doesn't come with something that's good for us, we're still sitting here again with the exact same problems that have not. And I will say I'm there and will commit to sitting down and doing that work. But I also want a commitment on the management team side that we will have the quickest responses that we can to those legal barriers that have gotten in our way every single time. Not that I'm saying that we got to roadblock through them, but you know, that we can get answers and not have to wait 90 days, 120 days, or sometimes we waited 7-8 months for responses. In my opinion, that's not acceptable.
So you're thinking kind of game plan out, if there are some different, you know, think through some different potential outcomes from this study and the recommendation, and then sort of have the next few steps kind of outlined so we can hit the ground running when that occurs.
I love this idea, Blake. I really do. I think this is something that we've been hungry for, and something that I think we really have want to do. And I think we've had enough conversations and been around and around and around on these things too many times, that if we can put together a strategic plan and look at our plan document and say, how can we make this strategic plan come to life in this document? That would be great. Once again, we though run into the problem with legal, and then we end up just sitting around some more. And I'm tired of sitting around. I'm tired of talking about the same things over and over and over again. Can't we just come up with a strategic plan and propose that, instead of just, here's one solution, here's one solution? How can we take what we have and craft it into something that moves us forward? And then when TCG comes in, we're ready to meet them in some way, instead of just waiting for them to come up with something else. I really like that idea. I'd rather do that than sit around.
So this is Terry, and as I was just thinking or listening to this conversation, it just felt to me like I'm not for sure we need to be operating on two separate tracks. I feel like this work needs to happen on parallel tracks. And if there is feedback or input or ideas or strategies that TCG needs to be thinking about in response to the things that those of you who are serving on the committee believe to be important, or if there are structural plan issues that seem to be logical as we begin to move towards solutions, I feel like having things happening sort of in two different places, to me, doesn't get us where we need to get to as quickly as I think you want to go. So I would actually defer to Kathy a little bit here to ask a question about how much latitude do we have to feed thoughts, ideas, strategies, opportunities to TCG as they're working through sort of their matrix in a way that allows both the great thinking of the advisory committee and the great thinking of the consultants to be combined into two pieces of great thinking that get us a report that maybe is going to be closer to where we all thought maybe we had the opportunity to go.
And on that note, I think there's plenty of opportunity for us to have those dialogues with TCG. What I want to make sure that we do and we work together, and not that the work and the ideas brought forth by one complicates the work of the other. So I don't want TCG going off on a path doing something and then we bring something up and that derails them and moves them a different direction, or vice versa. Us, working on all this plan document stuff and they come up with something. So it's going to have to be a lot of constant communication of this is what we're thinking. And I just want to see what that does to what you're doing. Does it impact what you're doing? And so I can be that conduit between the two, and I'm happy to do that.
I wonder if it would be helpful for the advisory committee to identify sort of the top 2 or 3 things that they think are game changers that then could be shared with TCG as a way to at least get those on the table early enough so that we can determine whether or not it's consistent with either what they're thinking or where they're going, or if it's good enough information that might send them down a different path or a different direction that might, again, be responsive to, where the advisory committee is interested in taking this. I just feel like I don't want us to miss this opportunity, but I also hear what you're saying, Kathy, about not wanting to confuse the issue. But I feel like maybe we're early enough in the process that we can we can make both of those work. Just a thought.
And I think we are, and I think especially if I continue to push for at least the weekly meetings with TCG, it allows us to have that touch point so neither one of us gets off on a tangent that complicates each other's work.
Kathy and committee members, would it make sense, Kathy, as you meet weekly, should we in turn meet with you weekly or every other week so that our checkpoints are more than, we wait 4 or 5 weeks for something, so that, and of course, if you have a meeting in a week that it's like there's not much to update, do we just say no? I mean, I know so often we default to just the email communication, but I also think, is the email communication for all of us, does it just become more passive and not necessarily able to allow us to really zero in and hone in on, are we at each point along the way going down the track we want and need?
I'd be fine with a more frequent, regularly meeting of this group, just as a touch point.
Yeah, at least have it like calendared. And then if you don't have many updates, we have a low threshold for canceling just to make sure we have the time if needed, but not necessarily having this group meet for an hour every week.
Yeah, I would support that if that needs a motion that we would actually initiate. Whenever, Kathy, you've started those weekly meetings, that we would, meet some afternoon for 30 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever. I think if we carved out a half an hour, it'd be nice if we used less, but that would be my take, and I would agree with Brad.
Can we just get, I don't know, Wednesdays 4 to 4:30? Okay, we'll do that by fiat. Okay. Lola, do you have
Can you put that out there? Are you still on?
Yes.
Okay, that'd be great.
Every Wednesday, or do you want to do every other Wednesday?
Start with every, but again, Kathy, have a quick trigger to cancel those if you don't have any material updates, or you can quickly send it out by, a paragraph in an email. That's fine.
Okay. I'll try to arrange my TCG meetings on Tuesdays so I can have a fresh update for Wednesdays.
Perfect. We're at the top of the hour. Lola, do you want to close us out with your comment question?
I'm just concerned about the transparency and our members knowing, being in the know. Barb and I have received a lot of emails from retirees saying, what's going on? We don't know what's going on. Do I need to be scared, or I'm very concerned? And gee, I thought things were set and we were, so I think you said this too, Terry, and they said it last night. I think we have to let our people know transparency is of the utmost importance, as much as, I just think it has to happen. So when we have those meetings and something comes up, will those be available for people who can to be on as guest listeners? Will we be sending out updates to them, whether it's email or whatever way, the portal or whatever? I mean, I just want transparency to be of the utmost, importance for us.
Well, and I wonder, and not that, Kathy, you had talked about doing a fuller letter. Do we try to actually, if we can go to the simple postcard concept, if we're now going to do Wednesdays for, foreseeably maybe the next 4 or 5, do we try to get something out quicker that just says, number one, please go here to provide your information, and number two, the next 4 or 5 Wednesdays, please go to this link to see the meeting, the team's video link, so that we have it. And I mean, I know I like the idea of the fuller letter, but I also like the idea of this is a really good intentional communication that for the next probably 4 or 5 Wednesdays, and maybe even longer, there's going to be a 4 o'clock meeting, a 4 o'clock check-in, for lack of a better term, for what's going on. Maybe this is that avenue of that quick postcard that we can mail out with Doug's grand prize drawing of a car.
Blake, I like that. Thank you.
Can I offer just one quick thing there, Brad? So I think that including others in the meeting is great. I think that we have to be thoughtful about what meeting management is and how others engage and participate. So if the meetings are for the advisory board and others are able to participate and listen, that's one thing. But if we're inviting them to actively participate, that's something completely different. So I think we have to be sure that we're setting out expectation for roles and responsibilities in the meetings. I mean, it's no different than what we do at the school board level. We invite everybody to join us for the meeting. You participate when invited, and there are times in the meeting when we set aside time for that. So you might want to think about how that factors into just how you plan for that as well.
I totally agree, Terry. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Any other comments to close this out? All right, 3 minutes over. That's a record.
All right, we'll see everybody next Wednesday.
All right.
Thanks,
Have a good night,
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good seeing you all. 2 days in a row.
Thanks, Ms. Caldwell-Johnson.
Thanks, Terry.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.